What up, guys? This is the leader of the Emo Club, Mrs. Voorhees' favorite wrestler, and you are watching Stu's Wrestling Podcast.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast. It's time. Your host, Stu Palmer.
It's episode 132 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, and this week we come away from the formal interview format that you're all so aware of with my shows, and it is a special episode called Ask a Wrestling Podcaster, the UK edition. And my first guest is Tweet Wrestling's Kevin Williams, a man I went and saw Fozzy with last December, and also a previous guest on Stu's Wrestling Podcast. Tweet Wrestling is all about vintage wrestling memorabilia. Kev has a treasure trove of stuff in his collection. But the first question was, who should have been WWF World Champion who didn't get the chance?
Hi Stu, thanks very much for the question. Quite a hard one at that, but after a bit of thinking, I've come up with an answer. And I'm going with Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. So I think to 94-95 WWF, they needed a big guy to take it forward. Scott Hall is your man, and unfortunately, he didn't get the Winged Eagle Championship belt. And for question 2, which merchandise would I want? Quite an easy one this for me. The WWF spikes for Legion of Doom. 1992, SummerSlam 92, everyone had that sort of stuff, except for me. I didn't get hold of them. So Legion of Doom spikes. Other than that, I will go for some wrestling cards, Hulk Hogan 1982 rookie, and if you want to send one my way, I'm happy to take it. Cheers Stu, keep up the good work. We love your show, we love the podcast, Stewie's Wrestling Podcast. To complete the final question, who would I give the Winged Eagle to? Bam Bam Bigelow. The big man that can move, super talented. That was Bam Bam Bigelow. So that's pretty much all the questions now, Stu, unless you want to nail me with some more. So Bam Bam Bigelow, that is it. Thanks for having me on the show. Tweet Wrestling, Kev Williams. Take care for now, mate.
Next up, it is John Scott from Wrestling with Johners. Johners has his podcast. He does live interviews, but he also goes to a lot of the UK-based wrestling shows and does interviews in person. And you've got to go and check out his great content across YouTube and all podcast apps and socials. So yeah, just type in Wrestling with Johners to find him on the relevant apps, YouTube and social media. And here is John's answer to my question. And he's said the question, so I don't need to say it now. You've saved me a bit of time there, Johners, lad.
Hey Stewie, Johners here from the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Thanks for asking me to do this segment for your show on my favourite ever Intercontinental Champion and my favourite match of theirs. There's so many iconic Intercontinental Champions from over the years, from Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Owen Hart, Triple H and many, many more. But one individual that I've got to give credit to as being one of, if not the greatest Intercontinental Champions of all time, has to be the bad guy, Razor Ramon. And I think he was like a 3-time Intercontinental Champion, maybe more, but I specifically remember his run as Intercontinental Champion, or being involved in the program around that title around 1994 and 1995, in particular his series of classic matches with Shawn Michaels, and 2 matches that stand out in particular is his ladder match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10 in 1994, where they basically innovated a gimmick match that hadn't been used much, if at all, before, and they basically put this ladder match on the map and stole the show at WrestleMania 10, basically making megastars out of both of the individuals with the innovation and the offense that was being used in that match. And yeah, like I say, making WrestleMania 10 an amazing success with that match. And not to forget the rematch they had the following year, SummerSlam in 1995. It was essentially the same match again, another ladder match, but they took their match from the year before and took it to a whole new level. And they added on to what they did at WrestleMania 10 at SummerSlam 95 and gave us another 5-star match. Like I say, so much innovation, so much amazing offense, and the bad guy came out on top in both of those matches. So Razor Ramon, for me, is my favourite and the best Intercontinental Champion of all time. And those two matches against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10 and SummerSlam 95 certainly stand out to me as being two of the best matches of all time, two of the best Intercontinental Champion matches of all time, and two of the best matches of Razor Ramon, and helped to put those two onto the map to mega stardom as far as I'm concerned. But Stewie, thank you very much for inviting me on again. Don't forget to check out the Wrestling with John's podcast wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, and like I say, can't wait to see all the great things that you've got lined up in the future, Stu. Best of luck, and catch up with you.
We now arrive at the doors of the Turnbuckle Arms podcast with Jolly the Bear, Michael Jolly, a good friend of the show of Stu's Wrestling Podcast. And his podcast, the Turnbuckle Arms podcast, was incepted in June 2020 with his friends and like-minded wrestling fans that cover the latest goings on in wrestling. So here is the proprietor of the Turnbuckle Arms with his answer here again. He said the question, so I have not to read it out to you again. And here is Michael Jolly.
Hello, this is Jolly the Bear from the Turnbuckle Arms podcast, and that's a fantastic question to ask. I've thought long and hard about what matches I would have wanted to see if I were able to put something together regarding different generations of wrestlers, and I think for me, my first match that I would pick would be Will Ospreay, as of now, taking on Eddie Guerrero from around about the 2000 to 2004 period, which was during the SmackDown 6 era. I think both of these people are an amazing wrestler. Every match is 5-star caliber, you can't deny that. And I just think that these two together in the ring, if we could have ever seen it, would have been amazing. Just the quality of talent that would be in there to showcase what they can do in front of a live audience, whether it be pay-per-view, house show, a weekly show, it won't matter where. They'd just blow it out, blow the roof off the arena. There would just be an amazing match, and that's something that I would have absolutely loved to have seen happen. Obviously it hasn't, and it would never will, but you can always dream. And my second match, I had to think long and hard about this, but then something that happened a few weeks ago made me realise that's the match I wanted to see, and that would have been Hart Foundation pre-90, so around about 87, 88 with Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart versus FTR. Now obviously we've seen FTR pay homage to Bret Hart over the past few months during the Owen Hart tribute tournament, and especially, as I said, the last couple of months they've just really pushed the quality that they can do in the ring. The technical wrestling is just amazing from them, and I think them against a 80s Bret Hart as well as Jim the Anvil Neidhart would have been amazing. The fun that they would have had, the quality of match, the mat-based wrestling, just the grappling, just watching technical wrestling at its best would have been incredible. So, but unfortunately, I can only pick two, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. So they're my two to pick. Thank you for asking. Take care. See you soon.
The final guest for this special episode of Ask a Wrestling Podcaster, the UK edition, is none other than the host of What Do You Call It, George Buka. George predominantly interviews people from the wrestling fraternity, but he's also had actors, people from film, and he's also had some football people on his show. So he's done other genres as well. He's mixed it up, he really has. And he's been very supportive of me, as have I to him. So here we go, and again, I don't need to give the question out because they've all said the question they've been asked. Light work for me this week, light work. So here he is, the host of What Do You Call It, George Buka.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's GB from What Do You Call It? podcast. Yes, I still do that. And another video. Anyway, my good friend Stu from Stu's Wrestling Podcast has asked me a question. And the question is, what or who would be on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling? So I'll give you the answer. First of all, Hulk Hogan. I know he's not Mr. Popular in 2022. I don't necessarily agree with comments he's made, but hard to ignore what he's done for the wrestling business. And I'm sorry, he just has to go in there if we sort of just focus on his wrestling and his achievements and, you know, what he's done. So I've got to go with Hulk Hogan's best mate, Bret Hart. Now, the reason I go with the Hitman, simple. He is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. He literally carried wrestling during the dark times and has had some of the best matches in wrestling history. Number 3, Virgil Lownkin. Steve Austin. Hard to ignore what he did and was one of the reasons WWE won the Monday Night War. I'm not going to take away The Rock, Triple H, Foley, but, you know, Austin was pretty much the main reason why. You know, the Attitude Era, 316, his promos, as soon as that music hit, the glass shattered, everyone erupted. It's a shame that his career got short, but might have been a bit of a blessing in a way. So it didn't necessarily tarnish his legacy. Number 4, I said this about 10 years ago, people would want to beat the fuck out of me. But I'll go with John Cena. That's my last one. I just think he is only now starting to get the credit he deserves. I know, you know, the whole you can't see me in the PG era, but if you just take a step back and realise how long he was at the top for, and rightfully so, always charity work, and just seemed like a good guy all around, and just some of the legendary feuds he's had, Batista, Triple H, Orton, Nexus, CM Punk, Bray Wyatt, AJ Styles, and while there's been the odd time that he could have maybe elevate someone, he does know what is best for business, and, you know, he's put over people's when it's mattered. So, yeah, that is my top 4 for my Mount Rushmore of wrestling. Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Steve Austin, and John Cena. You heard.
A big thank you to Kevin Williams of Tweet Wrestling. You can find him at Tweet Wrestling on all socials and YouTube. Great stuff. Memorabilia from yesteryear, from the time when I was watching it as a kid as well, so I can relate to that. I don't collect myself, but I love seeing what Kev has amassed with wrestling memorabilia. Also, a big thank you to Wrestling with John's John Scott as well for his answer. And you can see all of John's content at Wrestling with John's across all socials, YouTube. Type it in to your preferred podcast app as well. You can find him. He has had Scotty Too Hotty on recently. A fantastic episode. I implore you to watch that. Also, a big thank you to the landlord of the Turnbuckle Arms, which is returning, the Turnbuckle Arms podcast with Jolly the Bear and his crew, Michael Jolly. After a little hiatus, they'll be back with content, a good round table, discussion-based podcast on the latest happenings in pro wrestling. And my final guest, I've got to thank him too, in this UK edition of Ask a Wrestling Podcaster on SWP. It is, what do you call it, George Buka. And he's had some fantastic interviews with the Impact Wrestling guys as well on the Press Pass. So much content from him there. And if you like football, if you like films and that, then he has also got that stuff for you too. So yes, check him out. What do you call it? On all your podcast apps and YouTube and on the socials. And we will see you very soon for episode 133 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast. Enjoy.